Honk. Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's new thing, and I have a fun one planned. We're going to do some Barbenheimer because I've seen both the movies. It's culturally relevant, and they actually kind of have interesting things to talk about. I mean, they do, not kind of. They actually do have interesting things to talk about. Unlike a lot of the slop that's in theaters, at least more recently. I think it's funny that, like, the movie event of the summer, it's really just due to clever marketing on the part of the Barbie team, has become a weekend where you have a historical drama that would usually probably be released in December in order to get an Academy Award nomination. And Barbie is more of, I guess, a typical summer movie. But, like, I would not be surprised if this was one of the highest earning weekends in Hollywood this summer. And I think it's the only one, like, where there wasn't any superhero or stuff like that, and it's not a sequel, right? These are both, like, original stories. But really interesting that that's kind of the thing that's going on. So, and I think it's a good thing. At least it's different. So we're going to talk about that. But first, let's get to our Bible verse, because when I think of Barbenheimer, the only thing I can think of is Revelation 6. And Revelation 6 is the part of the Revelation where you have the four horsemen. And obviously, you know, I can tell, like, I think we're living in the end times because I'm sure we could relate the movies. Barbenheimer is probably, like, Barbie is probably, like, the one who is supposed to take peace from the earth, and then Oppenheimer is the one who brings death, right? You could easily do this. But I'll say why I selected this once we get into kind of our movies, because it is kind of an odd choice. But I'll read it. We're gonna go just through the fourth seal. So we're just gonna do the four kind of horsemen, the famous part of this thing that everyone knows. And of course, I did the King James version because I normally read the NIV or the ESV or whatever, but, like, it's just so much more epic when you have, like, this old language. And if I could affect a British accent with any talent, I would for reading this. But alas, I can't, so I'll just have to do it in the American accent. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering, and to conquer. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and that there was given unto him a great sword. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine." And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. So that is the reading of the four horsemen from the book of Revelation. Here's a nice painting of it, as you can see, done by, I believe, a French artist, famous painting. Right to left, you have conquest, war, famine, death. At the bottom, you kind of have people suffering from those things. It's kind of hard to see them, but you see people being scared of the guy who's coming to conquer them. You see people killing each other under the war guy. You see people kind of eating one another under the famine. And then under death, you just have a bunch of dead bodies, right? So he's following all of them, kind of cleaning up after them. And usually also kind of seen as pestilence, too. Different ways of kind of reading this. Revelation, as you know, if you were here for my little Bible study during the pandemic on it online, or if you've ever done a reading, you know that it's very metaphorical, very visual kind of stuff. So there's a lot of mixed interpretation on what these guys mean, right? I mean, people would go as far to say, well, Barbie is the guy on the white horse, and and Oppenheimer's the guy on the pale horse of death or whatever. People would go as far as say that. But I think what's important about this is, firstly, what this painting draws attention to is these are usually seen as enemies or as things against God, not under his control. But as you remember in the passage, right, the Lord gives power over them to do these things, to go out and do this, right? And you actually see this in this painting. It's really nice. At the top, you can see a lamb, right, that was slain, which is this thing, right, the Lamb of God, which is a common depiction of Jesus, right? And he has the book there, so the scroll, and he's the one kind of overseeing all of this. And so I think it's really interesting that we usually see these guys as being like the you know, if you were to make a video game about it, like, and you had to like play Revelation, the video game, and you had to like kill Satan or something like that, like these would be bosses, like mini bosses or something, right? But in reality, like, they're actually under control of Christ, and that's made pretty clear because right after this, right, the voice of the martyrs cries out, and God tells them to wait a little bit longer, right? And this is, it says right here, right, he gives them a fourth part of the earth, and so, you know, this isn't, they aren't taking this. So anyway, it's just an interesting thing. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the movie event of the summer, Barbenheimer here, has quite a two very different themes, obviously very different topics that they're going for, and what they're talking about. But interestingly enough, kind of rotate around the same concept of death. Obviously, like, they're talking about more than just death in most of their movies, but like death is the thing that links both of them. And if you've seen both of them, you know why. But if you haven't, you know, maybe it's odd that you would think like a Barbie movie is about death. But if you've seen Barbie, you know what that is, what that's talking about, right? So when I talk about these movies, I am going to do it with spoilers. So if you are worried about being spoiled on these movies, then guess what? You only have, how long have I been recording this for? 7 minutes. You've got through 7 minutes of a video, and you can go about your day. But if you do want to know what I think about these movies, then keep watching. I mean, come on. For Oppenheimer, he builds a bomb, right? I mean, we all know what happens. He builds the bomb, all right? There's no suspense there. There is actually quite a good amount of suspense in the movie. So I'll talk about Oppenheimer first. Oppenheimer, The World Forever Changes, right? Filmed by Christopher Nolan. Now, I actually wasn't excited to see this. I felt like I was required to, because I go to see every historical drama movie that's out, and if I've sat through so many bad Ridley Scott movies, and I'm not a big Christopher Nolan fan, so but I felt like I owed Nolan this because I've seen all the Ridley Scott movies, and I want to encourage Hollywood to continue to make drama movies, and maybe like we'll get an Apocalypto again. But Oppenheimer ended up being really good. I actually really enjoyed it. The only thing I didn't like about it was really the sound mixing. The sound was like really weird and off, and I know kind of why that was done. But sometimes you can't hear what the characters are saying, especially early in the movie. I kind of surprising. But hey, he didn't use Hans Zimmer, and Hans Zimmer, I'm glad that he's not being employed anymore. I don't mean it in that way, but I don't like his tracks that much. This time they got Ludwig Göransson to do it, and I think he's a lot better. Did it blow me away? Pun, whatever. I didn't mean that, but whatever. No, but like it was the soundtrack was really good. But the movie itself was quite good. I mean, it's a biopic, right? Not of Oppenheimer's whole life, although there's sequences that you see kind of from the future. You see nothing from his past, other than kind of his becoming, once he is in graduate school, kind of this great physicist type of thing. He's meeting with these other minds. A lot of people have compared this, like, if you're a physics person, this is like the Avengers for physics, because like if you can think of like a famous person who was a physicist in the 1900s in the 20th century, chances are they're in this movie, and it really is true. One of my friends, good friends from college, was a physics guy, and even though I had very little care for this type of stuff, a lot of these names I recognized and knew that why they were important because of him, and so it is interesting for that. But obviously, the real question of Oppenheimer, right, is the world changes forever or forever changes. And this movie's based on a book called American Prometheus, which was a biography of Oppenheimer. It won the Pulitzer Prize. I've heard it's really good. Haven't read it myself, but like in the beginning of the movie, they state very clearly that he is an American Prometheus and who Prometheus is. Prometheus, for those of you who don't know, let me pull up a picture of him here. Prometheus is a Titan from Greek mythology, and he is the one who is very famous. There's that terrible, speaking of Ridley Scott, terrible Ridley Scott movie, Prometheus, at the top here. Yeah, this is fine. Yeah, we'll just open this in new tab. Oh, not link. I want the image. There we go. So Prometheus is the one on the right over here. On the left over here is Atlas. But Prometheus is the one who steals fire from the gods and brings it down to man, which basically ends up setting up humanity as having technology. And this isn't something the gods wanted, right? They didn't want humanity to have this technology because with it challenges them, brings destruction, all these other types of things, right? And so Prometheus is sentenced to be chained to a rock, and there he has a buzzard or an eagle that comes every day and pecks out his guts, and then once it's done, overnight it grows back and it comes back the next day and pecks out his guts. And that's basically, depending on who you believe, that's how he's sentenced for that for eternity, or until Hercules comes and kills the eagle and sets him free. But that's what happens to Prometheus, right? It's basically this idea of giving technology to someone, and then it brings such destruction and things that you end up becoming a tragic kind of figure. And that's the role of Oppenheimer, right? And I think that plays into a lot of how Oppenheimer saw himself, if you know anything about the man, right? He it kind of is he's, you know, the father of the atomic bomb, but he's also someone who, once he kind of realized it, was like, oh no, like, what have I done? Frankenstein type of thing, right? Frankenstein is in the scientist, not the monster. And so it's an interesting movie. I would say it's a sympathetic portrayal of Oppenheimer, and obviously at the center of it is the bomb. Literally, I think it actually literally sets off in the center of the movie, somewhere around that point, which is pretty clever. And you never see it used on anyone. You get only hints of what it can do to someone's body when it is used in the movie. But you don't really see any of the destruction. So if you're particularly squeamish or anything, you don't have to worry that the Oppenheimer movie is going to show that to you. But it still is about the bomb and the legacy of the bomb and legacy of Oppenheimer, and should the bomb been used, and what he's worried about, right? It's going to destroy the world. This is the big fear about nuclear weapons, right? And obviously, like, there's a lot you can go into here, and I could do a whole thing on the nuclear weapons and bombs and whether or not should have been dropped and not dropped, and kind of the Christian way of viewing that ethical solution or ethical problem. And that's all dealt with in the movie. They actually devote some time, not most of it, but some time to the consequences or the fear or whether or not they should and things like that, which I thought was handled pretty tastefully. And as someone who stands strongly on one side of that debate, I think both sides of that were represented fairly well. And so I'm glad that it seemed to be done with a little bit more nuance than you would normally see it done. And I appreciated that. But of course, the thing about this is that this bomb is used on a city, right, mostly of civilians, in order to end a war. And of course, the purpose of this is to bring death in order to stop more death. right? That's kind of the justifying solution of the use of the atom bomb in the Second World War, right? That's why they were building it. It was originally to destroy the Nazis, but of course the Nazis were fallen by the time the bomb was created completely, and so it ended up being used on the Japanese instead. Um, but there's this idea, right, that and Oppenheimer himself would quote the Bhagavad Gita, which I have over there on my shelf, where he talks about how he and I think this is something that he thought about later. I don't think it was in the moment, but he talks about how he's become death, the destroyer of worlds. He quotes one of the gods from the Bhagavad Gita, and you can see the similarities, right? That like you bring death, and all of these things happen, right? These are things that come, and death is ultimately the thing that follows up on these things last. By the way, if I start like sweating profusely, it's because I don't want to ruin the audio by turning on my AC, but it is hot in here. So just like if I start dying, just know I'm all right. And so it really is about like what is acceptable science, right? How does someone deal with creating something that can cause so much death? And I think from a Christian perspective, right, what would give me comfort in the face of this, and there's like some really good Christian songs from the early 50s about the atom bomb, actually, by one guy. There's two of them. You can only find them on YouTube. They're not on Spotify, but they should. Someone should do I don't know why. Let me see. It's called Atomic Power, and it's by Fred Kirby. And he also did When the Hell Bomb Falls, and they're actually really good. Yeah, 1950. You can see it's like right here. And maybe it was originally by the Buchanan brothers. I don't know. Maybe it was here. But these, you'll listen to them, and they both have very Christian themes about how to react to the atomic bomb, because that's what people were doing, right? Is like, how do you react to something that can cause this much damage? And basically, it's be responsible with the things that God has allowed us to create, right? And also understand that these things have consequences, that you shouldn't just launch them. I think this is something that we understand pretty well these days, but you never know, right? And so it's just a very important reminder that that death is something that even people who are very idealistic and very not bloodthirsty can bring about sometimes in their quest to end it, and that might be the biggest part of that. And so next, let's change topics and talk about Barbie. Another Prometheus, if you will. And of course, this is the part of why this is funny is because you can't have two more opposite movies, right, that are kind of releasing on the same weekend. You have Barbie, which is a much more happy movie, and then you have Oppenheimer, which is a lot darker. So give me 1 second. Someone just rang the doorbell. It was our AC guys, so hopefully that means that the AC is going to be fixed soon. Anyway, Barbie. So Barbie movie, I know I was actually really excited to see this movie because if you've seen the trailers, the team that did the advertisements for this movie knocked it out of the park. I know they don't do tips in that business, but man, if I was Mattel, I'd be giving them a tip because they really sold this movie in a way that looked really fun and presented things in a really interesting way, mostly focused on Ken, and that's really interesting because of what the movie is about. So Barbie, right? Everyone knows Barbie. Barbie's the doll, famous doll, right, from the 50s, I believe, is when she first came out. And I like how the Google thing has all the Barbie thing. Yeah, 1959. So quite a while ago at this point, a cultural icon, right, in the United States and around the world. It's actually, I mean, Barbie is kind of seen as kind of like McDonald's or Coca-Cola as being one of those American cultural products that is just kind of enveloped all around the world. You can find Barbie all over the place. Actually, one of the things that was pointed out, kind of interestingly, again, you have a weird kind of similarity between Oppenheimer and Barbie, is that obviously the nukes were first dropped in Japan, and Barbie was also first manufactured in Japan. So the connections that people have been finding between these movies has been really funny to me. And so, what is Barbie about? Well, Barbie, I know like when you think of Barbie, you think it would be for kids. Let me tell you, this movie's not for kids. It's PG-13, and that doesn't mean that some kids can watch PG-13 movies, but it's not made for little girls. This movie is made for, I believe, women probably around my age, maybe a little older, and generally women who grew up playing with Barbie dolls. And because it's mostly focused on Barbie's legacy and the way that she's been received in the world and how she's been viewed positively, mostly negatively, and what that kind of means. And so you'll first of all, if you've been plugged into the situation, like into any political situation at all, you know that like this movie's been kind of divisive because of the way it presents its message. So basically the message of the movie is a very feminist message, right? And I don't mean just like that in the terms of like women have equal rights or whatever. It's mostly in that like being a woman is bad in this world. It's actually a bad thing, and also that that it's a and that like the Barbie land is better because women are in charge. That's really kind of I don't the one of the big problems of this movie is it's really funny. So if you watch this, it's actually a really good comedy, but the message is really muddled. And I don't really know what women are supposed to take away from it. Because at the end of the day, it really can't. It begins to basically it critiques our world for being a patriarchy, right? And in doing so, I think it does that in a very poor way because it has to present our world in a fake way. And what I mean by that is it makes it seem worse than it is. And one of the best examples of this is the Mattel board. So one of the enemies in this movie, which I think is actually pretty bold on Mattel's part, and I can't believe they let Greta Gerwig get away with this. And I mean, I'm glad they did. I mean, I think it's good that to be a little self-deprecating. But like, there's the Mattel, who's the company that makes them, and one of the boards is they're trying to put Barbie back in her box. They wanted to return to Barbie Land because Barbie Land kind of exists alongside the world, but it's kind of cut off magically or whatever. And that what allows them to sell toys, right? So they're all about they want their product, they want money. And so it kind of pokes fun at the whole corporate thing where they like pretend to be feminist or pretend to be supporting these really progressive causes, but in actuality, they don't really care that much. But in the movie, the Mattel board and basically everyone in power there is a man, right? And they make all their money off the backs of women. Now, this is obviously a gross oversimplification. You can Google the Mattel board. I mean, I'll do it right now. Board of directors, Mattel. I mean, I'm not gonna be surprised if there are men and women kind of all over the place here. And so obviously, like in the movie, it's all men, and the head of the Barbie division is a man. But let's see, I bet it's a woman. In real life, right? Lisa McKnight is the executive vice president and global head of Barbie dolls and portfolio. And I don't really know why they felt the need to lie about that other than to just try and make the world look like it is worse. And I think that that's unfortunately part of Greta Gerwig's message here is that the world is really bad for women. And I can understand why a lot of women might feel that way about certain things, but I think if you were to sit back and honestly assess, is that really the case? And is it the case that it's better than the Barbie Land? So if you contrast this, right, if you flip the world and you look at Barbie Land, which is kind of where the beginning of the movie takes place in the end and stuff like that, all the women and Barbies have control over everything, right? They're the ones who everything rotates around. They don't even know where the Kens live. The Kens kind of exist just to be eye candy, and their whole existence is just to be noticed by Barbies, right? That's what gives them pleasure. So you think it's going to be kind of this really good inverse, or like, oh, just like how women have, that's kind of been the role of women in the world sometimes, that's the role of men in this world. And obviously kind of where the natural point of that story would be, I would say in the most life-affirming and best way possible, it would end with being like, wow, maybe like the way Barbie Land is run isn't that great, and we shouldn't treat the Kens the way that we treat them. But in actuality, it's like, no, never mind, it's totally fine, and we're going to give them maybe a little bit of rights, but nothing else. I don't really understand what Gerwig was trying to say by that, because she wants us to critique our world, but then think that's fine. I assume it was done for comedy, but like when you do a comedy thing and you're trying to make a point, and you undercut your point, it doesn't really work. Uh, so it's a little bit muddied. But the interesting thing in the wake of the Barbie movie has been how people have been responding, and especially around the messaging, because the real standout star in this movie is Ryan Gosling, who plays Ken. Anyone who's seen this movie, who's honest with you, will tell you that Ryan Gosling is the best part of the movie. I've talked to men about this, I've talked to women about this. Of course, small sample size. It's my immediate friend group and family and stuff like that. But like, he's the one who everyone thinks, right? And so you see here, right? It says she's everything. He's just Ken. And so you can already see kind of that's the thing. He goes with her to the real world. He finds out that men here have a lot more power, and sometimes all the power, in the terms of how Gerwig views the world, than in the Barbie land. And he goes, well, I need to bring this back. And so he brings patriarchy from the real world to Barbie land. And the way it's presented is so funny, because you'd think it would be like this doom and gloom type thing, but it ends up making everyone happy. The Kens are happy, the Barbies are happy, and again, the message gets muddled, right? They try to explain it in the movie as saying, well, the Barbies like just don't know about patriarchy, and so they were easily taken advantage of by the Kens, and so, but once you give them some feminist theory, that snaps them out of it. But it just, again, it muddies the water a little bit, right? Because if patriarchy is so bad, it should be obviously, this kind of bad thing that Barbie experiences when she goes to the real world. It was a little muddied. So that's like why I think my mother-in-law summed it up best when she said it's a good movie with a bad message. And I think that that's generally par for the course when it comes to Hollywood. But yeah, that's kind of how I would sum up Barbie. But how does Barbie intersect with death, right? Because that's what we're talking about. Well, interestingly enough, that's what sets Barbie off to go to the real world, because she lives this perfect life, and it ends up that she begins to have dreaded feelings of dying. And of course, in Barbie land, no one dies, right? You live forever because you're a toy, things like that. But it turns out that, if someone is playing with a Barbie in the real world and has feelings, that feeling will go to the Barbie in the Barbie land. And so whoever's playing with her is fearing death. And so she goes and she leaves. And ultimately, at the end of the movie, remember, we've been in spoiler territory for a while now, she chooses to end up leaving Barbie land, becoming a human woman, and dying. That's really what she chooses. It's kind of one of these classic things of, like, reminds me of Tolkien, where he uses this theme several times of the elves who live forever, giving up their immortality to be with the person they love and die there. Now she does it for herself, right? There's actually an absence of romance between her and Ken, which is kind of interesting. But she ends up choosing to die and to live this human life, right? And I think that I think it's important because both these movies are connected with the fear of death, the fear of killing people, and the fear of dying, and how that sets people off in trajectory. And I honestly think that, I've talked about this before, having this, I'll go back to the Barbenheimer, having this understanding and being able to accept death, I think, is actually a really important part of being a human and understanding who we are, right? That we aren't going to live forever, at least in these bodies, right? In this sinful world that we were born into, we aren't going to live forever. And we have to understand that, because that's what kind of sets us up for doing what we need to do. So yeah, that's Barbenheimer. I mean, Barbie was mostly good, really funny, even if I didn't agree with all the messaging, fine. Oppenheimer was also really good, and outside of, like, don't take little girls or little kids to see Barbie. It's not probably appropriate for them. Oppenheimer has nudity and stuff in it, but, like, largely, actually, outside of that, it seems to be, I think there's just a tiny bit of cursing, but not that much. But both are good. So I'd recommend, if either of those are interesting to you, go ahead and see them. And so that's what we talked about today. I'm glad you were able to join me, and I will see you guys on Sunday for worship. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and peace out.